How are you?
I'm doing great.
If you could just tell us where you are, first of all. I'm in Paris, France. You know that, but maybe not everybody knows that. And you are where?
I am based outside of Boston, Massachusetts, on the East Coast of the US.
And how long have you been there? Is that where you're from originally?
No, I
No.
was born and raised in Pennsylvania, still on the East Coast, but
Yeah.
mid-Atlantic. And then after spending time in Russia, I came back to the US and decided to move to Massachusetts. So I've been here since 2001.
And I discovered you. I feel like I've known you a long time, but
We
actually
have.
we didn't meet until in Pennsylvania, actually at a TESOL
Yeah.
convention. That was the first time we'd met. But you were. I just want to get right into this because it's just so important for me to do. It's the first time I ever talked to you about this with an audience. But you really inspired me and so many other people early on because and tell me, was there any when you made your first video for you? Was there anyone else doing that? I mean, did you?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I'm not going to say that I was the first. I wasn't. First, I want to give credit to Mr. Duncan because he was in the UK and he started 2006. And he has
Okay.
his own unique style. So kudos to Duncan that he's been on since 2006 with his own unique style.
Mm,
So I
mm.
did know, I did see him. And also kudos to Sarah from the Daily English Show. She also came
Yeah.
before Duncan,
Mm.
2006.
Okay.
But people were doing very different things. Like Duncan is out there with his style. Um, Sarah in New Zealand was doing this daily English show. Daily, she was
Yeah.
turning on the
I'd forgotten
camera,
about that. I remember
and
now. I
there
remember.
were early experiments, but I was still thinking, I want to do it. Yeah, everyone who comes on thinks I want to do it my way. I want to do it
Mm.
with my stamp, and it was a similar thing. So I felt similarly that I saw a couple of English videos, but felt like no one's packaging the whole lesson like a real lesson, like people who don't get to go to the classrooms.
Right.
What are we missing out on? Like an actual structured lesson with exercises, explanations, and so I was more old school and still kind of am, but that was my original desire of try to packaging that sort of learning experience for
Yeah.
people. Hmm.
Yeah. So that was new then, what you did. It wasn't.
Yes.
It's not as important if you were the first on YouTube, but what's important doing English language teaching, but what's important is that you were the first to do it that way. And a lot of other people, as we know, got started doing it that way too. So it's just amazing. And but yeah, I remember those people now too, but I definitely felt more of a connection maybe because we're both from the States. It's not New Zealand, it's not England, I don't know, or just the things that I was thinking about at the time, like phrasal verbs. I was like, oh, somebody else is talking about phrasal verbs. Yeah. So with when you started on YouTube, did you feel like that's where you were going to focus? I mean, is that where you focused all of your attention, or were you doing other things back then?
No, I mean, the short version of my story is I'm a former classroom teacher. I did come from the classroom. I did private lessons, group classes. I had experience over in Russia with kids, teens, and adults. When I came back to Boston, I was at an intensive English program.
Mm,
So I taught a lot of the students were university age, but a mix. Private, mostly group lessons. I also got the chance to run a teacher training program, got to write in-house materials. But long story short is that I had an opportunity to step outside the classroom, one, because I was moving towards the period where I wanted to be a mom, and
mm.
motherhood was a plan. But I also got my first textbook contract, and that was a bridge outside of the classroom to see what else I could do. And you can't have everything that you want in life, not at least all at the same time. You have to make choices. It was very difficult because I did like the school, loved the staff, loved the
Mm.
students, but I was so excited to write and I
Yeah.
wanted to try that. So I was doing textbook writing. I had two children, and 2007 came around, and my daughter had just been born. I have two kids. My daughter was just a few months old, and I was sleep deprived for more than a decade. I don't know how I said anything coherently on camera in those first years, but I wanted to teach. I miss teaching. It's
Yeah.
one thing to write textbook materials and even blog, but no, I wanted to teach a lot.
Mm.
I wanted to find a way to stay professionally active.
And when you
Um,
when you make videos for YouTube, when you're doing it back then, did you feel like you were teaching And that was, you could get what you wanted as a teacher from making
No,
videos,
not
or it
fully.
really felt different than
No,
being.
it's different. It's very different, of course. I think, but it was a growing experience of like it was a challenge. Like, how much could I transfer
Mm,
from my experience from the classroom to this online environment where it's one way? I don't see who I'm teaching. I
yeah,
don't know if they're going to like the lesson or not. You don't get that instant feedback.
yeah.
So it was an exciting challenge to think, how much could I transfer? What else do I need to learn?
Mm,
And the technical aspect was the huge part that I was missing for
right.
those early years. But thank goodness the platform and the audience, everyone was very forgiving because they were just eager for like quality content. Never mind, I didn't know how to edit.
Yeah.
My audio was shaky and everything else needed improvement. But I promise that if you like it, if you support me, I will get better and I will
Mhm.
become a better video maker. And I
Yeah.
did. The more support I got, the more I invested in trying to become better at being an online teacher.
You have since then, like, still focused a lot on reaching people through new media. How much of that is directly to students, and how much of that is more focused on teacher training and development, and how much of that is, I know you really like to write, and how much of that
Yeah, I
maybe
do.
want to talk about your blog and all of that? Like, you balance. Where's the emphasis, or is it a mix?
Oh, there's the key word, balance. Sometimes I'm missing it because I get so excited by many different projects. That's one of my downfalls is I get
I think a
very
lot of us.
excited. I get excited about creative opportunities and, it's the downfall of trying too many things at once or saying yes to too many things. I've become better over the
Mm,
past few years, but it goes back to your earlier question is that I love online teaching. I love making videos. It is teaching. I feel
mm,
it is. I felt like I had to get some validation of like, am I a teacher or not if I'm on YouTube and not in the classroom? But I will recognize that, of course, it's different from live instruction. And I felt that in order to keep up my teaching skills in general, I can't totally remove myself from live instruction, whether it's group or one-on-one. So if I went on YouTube 2007, I started private lessons in 2009, and then gradually I started
mm,
experimenting here and there with some group courses, group lessons, but I felt and I still feel very firmly that I want to have live instruction in my career and in
mm.
my schedule. There are times where I've had to cut back because of commitments, but for the most part, I've steadily done live teaching as well because I feel that's like a set of skills that I want to keep up. And the more recent efforts to sort of combine the two, it's a format that I haven't seen many people do. I don't think anyone, for better for worse, whether it's
Mm,
popular or not, I'm excited again by the possibilities. I've brought students on camera with me. And it's
yeah,
like a huge test to say, like, here's a person who needs to learn English. This is not a script. This is
mm,
not
yeah. I've seen that with you
pre-planned.
on
And
Holo.
let's see if I can do this on camera with everybody watching, whether or not there will be results. With teachers watching, what am I
Yeah,
doing? And it's not scripted. So,
right.
choices are made on the spot. And then
Fun to
it
watch.
makes
It's
me
fun to watch.
reflect too, like, huh, okay, that worked. Or, huh, why did I do that? so, I have YouTube as my main platform, and I've integrated live instruction using different platforms from Skype to Zoom, other platforms that have invited me to teach. I still blog, and then again, like trying to find different ways to extend the learning experience have really pushed me to find different platforms with different kinds of tools. So.
And it's really great to have you as our second featured teacher, and that
Mhm.
you saw the last one with
Mhm.
Gabriel E.A. Clark. He was talking about grammar. You said you liked that. You felt a connection to what he was saying. Um,
Anybody who defends grammar, yes. I, when people say I don't like grammar, grammar is not important, I'm like, no, no, no. But I liked the wisdom and the practicality of his approach. That there is a time and a place
yeah,
to study grammar. Yes, you can certainly do too much of it. There's a point where it's not effective anymore,
yeah,
but there's certainly a place for grammar and a reason to have direct teaching.
yeah.
So I like, again, that balance of all skills, but grammar has a place. And I think the more informed you are about grammatical patterns, probably the more success you'll have as a communicator. You'll have more
Mm.
accuracy.
Mm, mm. And speaking of skills, what so often I'm sure I get this question. I'm sure you do too, from students, and sort of this similar question from teachers. If it's a student saying, "Well, to really develop my fluency, my accuracy, should I be focusing on, my pronunciation, my grammar, my vocabulary?" And teachers like, where should I be? Emphasize, making less, should I be doing more in this area than that area? I think that's a very common issue. So what do you think about that? Uh,
All skills are important. I really believe that all skills deserve attention because they're all connected. There has to be integration. So even when private students come to me and say, I want to focus on this or that, I
mm,
usually make it pretty clear that, okay, but this is my suggested way of formatting our lessons. So even if you have a conversation, my suggestion might be, okay, what are we going to base it on? Maybe we should have a topic, and the topic could be, a TED Talk, it could be an article. So either they're going to work on their listening, and then we'll discuss it, or they're going to read, and then we'll discuss it. We're drawing vocabulary into that. They might have questions about grammar. As we go through it, I'll let them speak. We have our discussion, but I'm also listening, taking notes. And if I hear recurring mistakes, I'm going to point them out, and then we
mm,
have some
mm.
focus on grammar. So yes, the goal is to become better at conversation, but I'm weaving in the other skills because
Sure.
they're just as important. And I don't like to totally separate reading and writing from
Mm,
conversation, because reading can help boost the vocabulary. I think you process the grammar differently when you're able to see the written language than just hear it, and then sort of to um, digest the information further. And also, again, the multiple exposures that you need to the new vocabulary can come through writing. So let's say we had this great discussion for 30 minutes, but a follow-up assignment for a private student is often either a written reaction or a written summary, and then they get to reuse some of the vocabulary that either they picked up the first time or they picked up through our conversation.
mm,
So
mm,
yes, it's a conversation class, but I'm integrating the other skills. So,
mm,
and if you're independent, then I also give recommendations. I do this on live streams with large students, and I often get asked that question of,
mm,
how
mm.
do I improve vocabulary? How do I improve pronunciation?
Yeah,
There are a lot of wonderful free tools out there, and I
yeah.
like to promote them for different reasons. There are reading resources, listening resources, and
Mm,
I like to really promote the idea of, please give attention to the different skills.
mm,
Um,
mm.
you really can't isolate one from another.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree. How about if a teacher came to you and said, or we could look at this as a student coming to you and said, well, I don't really know what, what English I should be teaching or what English I should be learning. Should I be learning British English or American English? Should I be learning, more prescriptive grammar, or more what people actually say? I mean, of course, it's about everyone's needs, but it's, I think, becoming a little less clear in a
Yeah.
way, and maybe in a good way, as English becomes more of a lingua franca, and there's
Yeah.
crazy, like, people saying you have to try to speak like a native, so
Yeah.
but I understand at the same time, I mean, for me, learning French, for example, it would definitely occur to me to think about, maybe wanting to sound, not try to be a native, but sort of have, want to speak in a way that kind of blend in with other people.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if it's a student or a teacher, whichever way you want to answer it, how would you, what suggestions would you make?
It does matter whether I'm speaking to a teacher or a student, because I've been in that situation too. When you're a teacher in a school, you don't have a choice of textbooks usually. I mean, you might be able to bring in some supplemental material, but usually somebody else above you has handed
Yeah.
the series to you. And actually, in the one school I taught in Russia, actually it was in two different companies, they gave the textbooks to us, and they were British.
Mm.
So I'm like, okay, but
Mhm.
so what you do is you work with the textbook, but then you can explain the variations that you're aware of and that you personally know of. For me, it was the American variations. So I think you could work with the textbook and still bring in your insights, that your knowledge of other Englishes. If you're able to work in supplemental material, I think that that is the opportunity to expose your students to other varieties, which I
Mm.
think is so very important. To students, I say this all the time, especially the way language learning is happening today. How many students, even if they're in a wonderful program with a wonderful teacher, one, they may not be only working with one teacher. Even at that school, they might have
Mm.
multiple teachers, which is, I think, really good thing. But
Yeah.
also, a lot of them know that there's a lot available online. So they're coming to us online teachers. So a learner today very often is learning from different teachers. And I tell people, if they're not, why not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you need to be learning, and not just from Americans, not just from British speakers. I mean, there are many varieties of English, and you will do yourself a service if you expose yourself to speakers from different countries, and not just native speakers. I've said this many times in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
live streams with Instagram lives. I go live with a lot of teachers who happen to be non-native speaking teachers. And I've said, you definitely want to hear English spoken by different people,
Yeah.
native and non-native, because it is a global language. We have this for global communication. The whole goal is for communication
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
clarity. So you need to train your ears to accept variations.
Mm.
So you'll do yourself a service now if you access all the different models out there. Not all of them, but I mean,
Mm.
be selective, be wise, and don't limit yourself to only one variety of English.
Yeah.
And I also said it's important to keep in mind, you can realistically follow a handful. There are hundreds of teachers out there. You cannot follow them all, but you can mix it up over the course of a year, for example, gaining exposure to different teaching styles and different speaking styles.
Mm.
Gender is an issue, men, women, age is an issue.
Mm.
I feel like, yes, I've told people I know I'm becoming one of the older ones now. But so you do want to
Seasoned
listen to
veterans. Yeah.
you do want to listen to the younger ones as well, because they might be throwing in some slang that I don't use. But again, who are you communicating with? A variety of people,
Yeah.
and you don't want to limit yourself to one demographic, because most likely in this world you will have interaction with different people, men, women, native, non-native, and of different age groups.
Yeah. Well, I'm keeping count. I don't know if you've heard a story like this, but I'm keeping count of stories that people have told me of being, it's happened actually only with British English speakers so far, but being in a meeting, one was an in-person meeting, the other two were virtual, online conference like Zoom, and and people were speaking, I don't remember exactly the English. It's like a Brazilian person speaking English, Korean person speaking English, Indian person speaking English. And in these three stories, the British person had a hard time understanding and keeping up. I mean, that's a wonderful irony to me about
Yes.
what's happening now. So the whole notion of, those people needing to learn how to speak British English or Australian English or Canadian English, when in fact it's becoming this thing.
It is, it is.
Uh,
And I can't tell you that I also have to give pep talks to some of my advanced students, those who have been in certain regions of the US and have had success. I mean, they function fine. They're proficient. They're very proficient. Then they go to a certain part of our country. There's a new mix in the population, and people are having trouble understanding them. And I
mm,
have to tell them, it's not fully you or just you. There are other factors here at play.
yeah,
If those people, native English speaking people here in America, have not had exposure to many accents themselves, because I have people in my own family, I love them dearly, but they have not been out of a certain region
mm,
or have not had much exposure to
mm,
English spoken by non-natives. The accent just sort of
yeah,
draws like this curtain of like, what? Like, and it's like, goodness, can you just like relax, open your ears
mm,
and listen? And the accent should really not affect intelligibility, but it does for some people if they have not trained themselves to accept variation. I mean, having my accent going down into certain regions of southern US, I mean, I'm sure I would be marked as a northerner.
right.
The speech is different, but it's within a range that it should be understood.
Mm,
And that goes back to the idea of like, should we really be saying the goal is to speak like a native, sound like a
mm,
native?
mm,
That's
mm,
it's a really sensitive topic, and I think we need to take care in stating our goals and choosing our words. I think it's acceptable to talk about a standard in the sense that, you know, there is such thing as standard American English, and I feel
Mm.
that's primarily what I'm trying to teach. My goal is to help people speak English and understand English, but master the kind of English that will help them be successful in the greatest number of situations.
Mm. I like that.
So that's what the goal is. Do you have to sound like me to do that? No. You
Mm.
can have a British accent, Aussie
Yeah.
accent. You can
Right.
have a mix of accents. You can used to have the influence from your first language.
Yeah.
As long as pronunciation is within the range of what
Mm.
most people can understand, variations are fine. And
Yeah.
same thing with grammar. Again, like, why do we have certain standards? Because people come from so many different backgrounds. There has to be this common thread
Yeah.
so that we can have communication. The variations can happen when we move into other demographics. Like if I go back into my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, then I might in time slip into old habits. Even I was making a video with my Brazilian students, and the word iron came up. And the first time it came out of my mouth, I was like, iron. Like,
Yeah.
iron, why did I say iron? So it's code switching.
Yeah.
It's fun to have that ability, and you don't have to shed something
No.
permanently. You just
No.
have to know when to shift
Mm.
into
Mhm.
what variety for the appropriate situation.
That's it.
And it's not discarding your identity. We can have multiple identities. Can't we
Mm.
have multiple facets of our personality?
Yes.
It's like, you know, when I lived in Russia with the expat community, you mixed in Russian and English. And it was a really horrible habit to try to break coming back into the US. Like, no, I can't be mixing the two.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to adjust. And so it's fun to be able to have, you know, variations when you go within a certain social circle, but you have to constantly be aware of the situation and your audience, and that
Yeah.
should really influence your choice.
Yeah. Well, with your audience is mainly learners of English or teachers? It's mainly learners. You focus more. I mean, I think teachers. Not. I think I know there are many English language teachers that have learned a lot from you and continue to learn a lot from you by watching what you're doing with learners. But I know you also been active in TESOL and in teacher development and training. But would you say that these days you're focusing more on English learners than you are on connecting with teachers, or?
Yes, the focus will always be on the learners. They're the focus. But I love teacher training. I love professional development, and by seeking my own professional development, I mean it's mutual. If I ever lead, whether it's a TESOL talk or a live stream for professional development, I'm not really help giving professional development is so much giving it back to myself, because it
Mm.
forces me to prepare, it forces me to reflect.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful experience, and I am in touch with teachers. I know that there are teachers who come on to the comments on YouTube. I'm on a platform where I do live streams on Holo, and among the people who come to the live streams are teachers. In fact, we've
Mm.
already done a couple of professional discussions, just exchanging ideas, talking about teaching related matters through that. It's just a matter of connecting with each other and discussing things that we need to discuss in order to process it better,
Yeah.
reflect on it.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to me, as well as to those who really don't have access to professional development opportunities, especially live
Mm.
professional development opportunities.
Yeah. How often do you blog? Uh,
Um, Over the past few years, I've limited just to once a week. That's what I can handle. But I find it really wonderful because it really promotes reflective teaching. Um, I'm not doing the marketing strategy of like, what's the best day to post? No, it's like at the end of the week, it's me digesting what has gone on and what do I need to think more of. Is there anything practical that I can share, or is it just
mm.
some reflections? So I post on Fridays. Um, and that's what I've been doing. When I go to the TESOL conventions, I usually post more frequently because I
Mm.
am summarizing a lot of the sessions that I've attended, knowing that there are a lot of people who aren't able to attend the
Right.
TESOL
Right.
convention.
I have great memories of us doing
Yeah.
a presentation together.
The first time we met, there was a bigger group of us, but yeah,
Yeah.
we co-presented with Vicky of Simple English.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's it. It was
yeah.
in Portland. So Holo, do you? I have a feeling many people who are here and who will watch
Probably
this
don't know.
video asynchronously don't know about how
Mhm.
I didn't know about it till I saw you doing it. And then when I first went to look, the first thing I saw was what you described a bit earlier, saying that you were live with a student who was practicing some sentence,
Mhm.
repeating it, and you were giving correction, and then they were trying it again. It was all happening in real time. It's pretty incredible. Can you talk a little bit about this platform?
Sure, it's different from YouTube. YouTube, I actually have those videos with students where we film, then I produce, and that's a series of beginner and then basic English. But Holo is all live. The live streams are recorded. It started out with only one-on-one hop-ons, but now we're up to the point where we can have up to 4 students on camera with me. So we can have multiple
Wow.
hop-ons, which has been fun. So there's a lot of apps out there. I like Holo because it's very much like Instagram in format, but Instagram, one, is limited to one-on-one interaction, and two, Instagram, of course, is like YouTube. It's a hodgepodge of all kinds of possibilities, whereas
Yeah.
Holo is only for English language learning. So you already have the audience there, students looking for opportunities to learn. So like Instagram, I only go live with other teachers to have discussions again, but
Yeah.
on Holo, I give live interaction to students. And this is an alternative to those, for example, who can't afford private lessons. If that's not an option, group learning is. There
Mm.
are free and paid live streams. And that's also been something that I've been very committed to, is like, how can I offer services? First, how much can I offer for free to help people?
Yeah.
Um, what can I offer that's affordable? And then, the higher level of services, what's going to put food on my table? You have to balance all of those.
That's right.
But Holo has been wonderful because it's affordable for many, many people around the world. There are free and paid live streams. There are these monthly subscriptions. And then, of the 15,000 of some followers, let's say a couple hundred come to a live stream. And
Okay.
so the majority are listening, they're typing in the chat, and then I can bring 1, 2, 3, or 4 students at a time. And the sky's the limit on how you want to do it. I've
Mm.
done some grammar, pronunciation, whatnot, but mostly people want conversation skills.
Yeah.
So we've done some mini discussions, like it could be a debate where everybody shares different points of view. Agreeing and disagreeing. You see there another one I
I've
did, how
seen you do
things
that.
work, where people have to explain something, either a
Mm.
process or how things work. And so one person might explain a process, or people are asking details or questions for clarification.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have the up to 4 multiple hop-ons, so you could have these mini group discussions. It is a test. It's all live. You don't have the ability to screen share yet.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I like all these different platforms because they really force you to test the flexibility of your teaching. And
Yeah.
if there's one thing that I've really loved over the past 10 plus years, is just really developing my comfort level with multiple platforms and different kinds of tools. You're a teacher. Okay, so here's a box, open it up. What are the
Mm.
tools? Do something. It's kind of like Food Network. If you've ever
Yeah.
seen the shows where they open up the basket and boom, you have 20 minutes. Go ahead, cook. This is what I feel like online teaching is. It's kind of like a playground. You choose a platform.
Mhm.
What can you do with it? So
Does it ever get overwhelming or confusing, like trying to go from one to another, or have you sort of got things organized where I know you're doing different things in different places? That's why we're going to talk about Instagram next. But do you ever feel like it's a little bit too much try to do it?
sometimes the demands from the very beginning have been a lot. When I was like naive in 2007 saying, hey, if you want to write to me and you have questions, here's an email.
Yeah.
Boom. Like, it's like, oh no. It's like, okay, so we have to think about how am I going to answer everyone's questions. So yes, that aspect of online teaching has always been a challenge of how to help everybody without, you know, answering questions in every waking minute of my life. But Holo, no, you have to think, what is the platform designed for, or what do you see its potential use for? Holo for me is live instruction. I offer live instruction one-on-one through my website, Zoom, and then I'm using Holo as the group experience.
Mm.
It's live teaching, which I also find really exciting and stimulating when you realize that 200 plus are tuning in,
Yeah.
um, and you want to make this time productive, but also as interactive as possible. And it's challenging you. Okay, what can you do with 1, 2, 3,
Mm.
4 at a time, and keeping track of the text chat. Um, but I balance it. If I can say, hey, we just had this YouTube video and you tie it into a current discussion that's
Right.
happening on Holo, or don't forget there's another related video on Instagram that will
Mm.
follow up. So if it's nice to see the opportunities connect. And then same thing with the blogging. I
Mm.
might refer to works that I've done on YouTube or Instagram and reflect on why I did that and what teachers could be using those resources for.
Great. And so looking at Instagram now, you really spell it out, like what you're doing, pronunciation and listening, and then specifically looking at topics in U.S. culture and U.S. history. And
And
then
things that, yeah, things that I haven't done on YouTube. So that's the other thing is if you're going to be on multiple platforms, when there's me breaking that rule of or the advice to people, you don't have to be on every platform. And then I start counting how many platforms am I on.
not all of them. You
Not
can
all of
also,
them, but I'm using Instagram in a certain way. I'm only doing the 1-minute clips,
right.
which is also a little box. Again, I'm opening the basket and they're giving me one little tool. What can I do with it?
Mm.
So what can I do in a minute or less? I decided to focus on listening, mostly listening, speaking, and pronunciation. But more recently, I thought, you know what? Background information. If we all had more background information in
Mm.
cultural and historical context, maybe we'd have more success in understanding one another.
Mm.
And my personal contribution is American culture, American history. I would be fascinated if somebody did the same for other countries,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you need to have a little background information. These are the cultural differences that we bring into each conversation. We make assumptions that people understand what we're talking about, what references. I mean, you and I were just talking about bubblers and hoagies, and that's like over the head of people. What are they talking about? So, you have to take time to
Mm.
teach culture and history. And so what I'm doing with the history is choosing people, places, and events that I feel the average, let's say, adult American would know. We
Mm.
might not be able to give a lecture on it, but if I say Jim Crow laws, you know what I'm talking
Right.
about.
Right.
If I say, Custer's Last Stand, you
Mm.
can probably tell me one sentence about who
Mm.
Custer was and
Mm.
why he was standing there.
Right.
So if you don't have too much of that knowledge, you won't get the mindset of the Americans. For example, right now, what's happening with race and racism, if you have understanding of Jim Crow laws,
Right.
Martin Luther King, civil rights, even tying in the Native Americans here,
Mm.
you will have more understanding of why this has built up.
Right. And then of course along the way there's pronunciation, there's
Yes,
listening,
yes.
there's vocabulary, there's grammar stuff.
Yes, and I highlight that. So it's gap dictations. If
Yeah.
it's history and culture, it's a minute or less, me talking at a fast rate, which has been some criticism on YouTube, but
Mm.
that's my style. I like teaching so that the majority of people can understand me, but on Instagram, I have sped it up.
Yeah.
And I decided to do gap dictations where it's a short text. You can listen multiple times and you
Mm.
fill in missing words. So yes, you're doing listening, you're getting vocabulary, and you're getting the background information, culture and history.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm imagining you wanted to do the U.S. history stuff, and then when you had Instagram happen, you thought, okay, now I can do this because I'm not doing this on YouTube. Are there things that you're thinking about now you'd like to do that you haven't done, that maybe you'll do in the future?
It's funny, after 10 plus years, you think I would have covered every single possible grammar topic, and I haven't. So, because again, it's like, I want to do this, I want to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And then I feel, and so there's been a balance over the years between what people are asking for and
Mm.
what I feel they need. There
Mm.
wasn't tons of people saying, hey, we want to read aloud with you. And I thought, but you know what? You've never tried it maybe, and maybe you need to try this and see how effective it can be to read aloud, and not just once, but multiple times. So I built the oral reading fluency series on YouTube, not
Mm.
so much because it was demanded, but because I felt it was needed in
Mm.
response to people saying, I'm not confident, I want to speak more smoothly like you. And like, well,
Mm.
oral reading could be one of the things that will help you achieve that. So some of the things that I've developed, again, were not an answer to a request, like a direct request. It was more like what I was hearing and me interpreting what their needs were.
Mhm.
The other thing I hear is like, it's so hard. A lot of the independent learners are these are adults, and a lot of them are busy. The other thing I hear is like, they have this inner desire and motivation, but then it's hard, and it's developing the habit and keeping up with the habit and finding the
Mm.
time and the
Mhm.
consistency. So I have the beginnings of my app. The Android version is out, but the iOS is still being developed. Once the iOS is out, then I will focus more attention on that. And why I decided to open my mind to this possibility is because the person who approached me, a gamer, um, developed this app that is tied into the alarm clock and reminder feature,
Hmm.
so that the idea is that you are setting reminders to
Aha.
study a few minutes a day, and that so if you've chosen those times, the alarm will go off, and it's my audio lesson saying, good
Oh, cool.
morning, let's start your lesson, let's learn to,
Wow, that's coming.
blah,
That's
blah.
coming soon,
Well, the Android voice version is out. I haven't heavily promoted it because the iOS is still being developed. But
yes.
if you follow me on social media, I certainly will post announcements about it when it's fully launched and out there, because that's something I feel that is a common it's a common complaint of
Mm.
learners, that
Yeah.
especially when they're studying independently, and it's up to them to keep up regular studies, how to fit in studies throughout their day. And I argue, can you fit at least 5 minutes or less each day? You
Mm.
should be able to answer yes. So I'm giving you the choice of when to stick that 5 minutes into your
Mm.
day. Set
Mm.
the alarm, and then my audio lessons will play. And also, again, as a way to make them more portable, because YouTube lessons are heavy and they're
Right.
video. But
Right.
if the people who've tested it out have told me, oh, I did this while I was, doing the laundry or walking out, and it's like, great. So that's another focus point that I'll have.
I did a blog post few years ago, and I asked 32
Mhm.
experts in ELT to tell me what they thought fluency, not what fluency in English is, but maybe like a tip for
Mhm.
learners, like how to achieve fluency, because I think we can probably agree that's the most common
How do
question.
I become fluent?
How do I become fluent in English? And of course, people have different ideas of what fluent means, and but
Yes.
it's fascinating to me to talk about that. And but I recall that I don't remember exactly right now what you said, but I know the word repetition was in there, or repeating something with
Yes,
repetition.
yes,
I was
yes,
like,
yes.
yes, because
Yes. Relax, repeat, remember.
my thing, meaningful repetition, sort of what I call,
Meaningful. Hmm.
well, and also what I call learning when you're not looking. Like, you're just hooked. You just want to repeat the song. You want to repeat the game in English. You want to watch the video again. And I'm wondering, like, because I thought about this just when you were talking about the reading out loud, and how people felt they weren't confident and not, and I think you said, maybe I'm wrong, but not just doing it once or something. So
Yes, multiple
I'm wondering
times.
how much repetition, like, is either directly or indirectly built into what you're doing. I know, like, dictations and gap fills, you
Yeah.
want to have to listen again. You got to do it.
Yes, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think that's what's similar to your songwriting and doing chants, is that it's just a limited amount of text so that it can be repeated. You don't, have a song that's 20 minutes long. You watch a YouTube lesson that's 20 minutes long, but
Yeah.
but if you really want to practice something, it has to be short.
Mm.
So the oral reading fluency texts are short texts, and they actually start out really easy. We're like A1, A2 level, and the point is they are supposed to be easy because I don't want the attention to be diverted to comprehension, like I'm focusing
Yes.
on complex vocabulary and grammar. I
That's right.
want you to have the confidence to read this
Mm.
and really focus on your oral expression.
Yeah.
And I build those fluency, high oral reading fluency texts with words from the general service list, so they're high frequency
Great.
words.
It's great.
Um, and the idea is that you read it four times with me in the video. You
Mm.
hear me read it,
Yeah.
then we do a listen repeat, then we do a slow reading, then we do a fast reading. I had one private student who was already quite at the advanced level, but she specifically wanted to focus on these texts. So in the course of many lessons, we read through all these different texts, and she practiced them. And boy, it was really funny because when she would read them, she was had a great ear. She was doing my intonation, my rhythm. I was like, whoa. It's
Yeah.
like, but as wonderful as that was, it wasn't the goal to sound exactly like me. You know, the goal
No,
was not sound like Jennifer, but it is, I am a model. And that is the thing. You want to hear multiple speakers
right,
have different models, and yes, you can strive to, you know, approximate, but
right.
ultimately you could have your own variations. But you're listening to me for the intonation, for the
Right.
phrasing, for the
Right, of
rhythm.
course. But this is true of any skill. I mean, somebody who's learning to dance is going
Yes,
to, it gets touchy with language because it gets into cultural stuff, and
yes, yes.
people feel uncomfortable. But the thing is, like, to have a model, how can you do things without models? In the arts or anything you're doing, and then you figure out your own thing after that. But especially, I think with intonation, word and
Yeah.
sentence stress, the linked to connected speech in English. I mean, that's something that almost everybody has to, model, shadow other people if they're really going to get it. And if they don't do that shadowing, I feel with that area of pronunciation, it's going to be a hard road ahead.
It is, it is, it is. And so in terms of content creation for teachers, even selecting materials or creating your own materials, my advice is, again, like, limit the amount of text if you really want to work in repetition.
Yeah,
Or if it is a long text and you read aloud, then it's only going to be an excerpt from that. The Instagram format is actually wonderful because it's a minute or less. So it is a very small piece of text that can be heard multiple times. And some people have told me that they don't just use it for listening, they start using it for listen, repeat,
uh-huh.
because then they have my model.
Yeah,
So again, a limited amount of text is
yeah,
helpful. But this, goes into other conversations of, like, models are good, standards are good. I think we have grown to be more sensitive and more reflective on how we present those models and how we state the objectives. And I think it's so important to tell learners, again, that, you do not have to sound exactly like me. I am a model.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and I do this also with pronunciation. I can't tell you how many times it's happened over the years. I have an accent. I'm like, yes, so do I. you know,
Can't speak
um,
that one.
yeah. Um, and I make my guarantee is that I'm not going to help you eliminate I guarantee no one
Yeah,
that. I'm not going to
I'm the
eliminate your
same.
accent. I'm not going to guarantee that. I'm going to help you reduce your accent only to the point so that more people can understand you.
Right, that's right.
That's what the goal is.
Yeah.
You can still have some accent, some influence,
Mm.
but as long as people understand,
Yeah.
then everything is good. It's, again, like, if you move into certain circles, like you're saying, they could be all native speakers, but if we're from different regions, I mean, it takes that initial time to adjust to the variations.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, and there's also I don't know how much you've thought about this with accent too. One thing that really frustrates me is when I get the feeling, I'm not going to say any names here, but the idea of keeping people feeling like they've got to sound native. It's also like it's unrealistic. I mean, unrealistic anyway. It also means that people are going to keep being frustrated and paying for lessons and doing, like, if people feel like they have to keep so they have no accent or so they make no mistakes.
yes, yes. When you said objectives, I think you have to think, what is attainable
Mm.
and what is worth attaining. What
Ah,
is attainable and what is worth
yeah,
attaining.
yeah, yeah.
Some people do have this excellent ear, and boy, they just, like, they can imitate different accents. I mean, when I see different actors, I'm amazed.
Mm.
Alexander Skarsgård, who I first discovered through the True Blood series, I became a fan. I mean, but he can do American, he can do British. Those are actors. They have
Yeah,
to. They have to convince us in those roles that they are British, that they are American. But the rest of us, we're not auditioning for a Hollywood film. So, we don't have to sound exactly like someone who
mm.
comes from a certain region,
Right,
as long as it's all clear and understood.
right.
So is a native-like accent is not necessarily attainable, nor should we make it the
Mm.
ultimate goal.
Sure.
It's just to be clearly understood. You have to be very careful. And yes, I mean, it's also very, very sad in any situation, whether we're talking about English or another language, any language being studied as a second language. Um, there's that whole emotional component, and it can be very hurtful
Mm.
when we feel that we're not worthy, we're criticized.
Mm.
It can be a big blow to our self-esteem, any kind of negative criticism. And if
Sure.
anyone's been on the receiving end of that, it can almost drive you to tears. I
Yeah,
mean, I've
yeah.
had students pretty much in tears
Mm.
over how they feel, of how colleagues make them feel over their accent, or how, their own family can make them feel because they
Mm.
have an accent. And
Yeah.
gosh, people, it's like, and I have to tell them, you know what? Do you honestly think that those people could even say a sentence in your language?
It's true.
No.
There's a shame. There's a
So you
shame.
just be proud of what you've done, and you keep in mind they would be lost. You put them in the center of your hometown, they would be lost. So you
Yeah.
be proud of the fact of what you've done and what you've
Mm.
achieved. And so we will work towards getting that better accent, but you hold on to your self-worth, because no one should take that away from you.
Absolutely.
Accent or no accent, and it's hard. I mean, and I've had that. I have some level of confidence with Russian. I don't speak it every day now, but boy, I remember the compliments, but more than anything, I remember the
Yeah.
criticism. I
Yeah.
remember people just saying flat out, like, your pronunciation is like really bad, or like,
Yeah.
like, they don't say that. They don't say it like that. Or the person in the restaurant when I was ordering just looked at me like, what
Yeah.
are you saying? And I was saying it in Russian so clear, like, I would like to order meat. Like, and I knew that because I've been speaking with plenty of other people who could
Uh-huh.
understand me. But again, it had to do with somebody who had not had exposure to foreigners speaking Russian.
Yeah,
And she's
that's right.
looking at me like I'm an alien.
Yeah.
But it's all hurtful. It's
Mhm,
hurtful.
mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
to all the language
Especially if you don't
learners
really
out there,
understand what's going on. So I think a lot of it is
toughen up. Yeah.
raising awareness about this.
Raising awareness.
So it's great
Yeah.
you're talking about it. If teachers watching this and students will watch this, because I think that's really really key. I wanted to ask you, since you've been in this in the game for so long, and you mentioned before that certain things you feel sometimes inspired to do, not necessarily because learners have asked you to do it, but because you feel like it's good for them. And I'm wondering, have you noticed any changes over the years as far as what English learners want to do? Like, has it sort of been consistent from the beginning, or?
No, I mean, there's the basic wants are there. They want guidance, they want advice, they want interaction, they want feedback. That's all there. I was saying in terms of content creation, I know personally my journey has taken me through a lot. So, for example, I know that my early videos were very traditional. It was almost like a textbook come alive.
Mhm, mhm.
And I still stand behind that. I think it was like an organized lesson, but I've pulled away. I've tried to experiment in loosening up a little bit with the format, when possible, filming outside. But I'm just saying that there's also, not just in terms of format, but also the topics. Because I have had experience publishing textbooks, I know the restrictions and certain topics that are
Mhm.
off
Mm.
limits in textbook writing, off
Mhm.
limits in a certain classroom within a certain institution. They may not want you to discuss certain issues, but what we see in the online world, like YouTube, Instagram, Holo, whatnot, they want to talk about life. They want to talk about these issues, and I feel a great freedom right now
That's
in
great.
2020 that if somebody wants to talk about what's happening and hurtful, someone did on Holo. It took me out by surprise that um, she herself African American and wanted to bring this up, and she was expressed being sad, and I'm like, oh, so what's wrong? It's just during a multiple hop on. I said, would you like to share what's wrong? And boom, it came out. It was the whole discussion of how she was being upset that particular day about race and racism. So
Mm.
there we were in a discussion about trying to promote tolerance and acceptance and whatnot, and I didn't anticipate that, but that's
Wow.
what the students needed to hear that one day. So more recently on YouTube, I have had videos addressing controversial, sensitive issues, because I think people want to be able to talk about this. It's in the news.
Yeah.
They need the language. So I walk this fine line
Mm.
of trying to, again, still be the teacher. I'm not here to politicize. I'm not here to,
Yeah.
lecture anybody, but I'm here to give the language so that these people can follow and participate in the
Yeah.
discussions about the hot topics.
Yeah, well, it's great that you do, because you're the type of teacher who's suited to do that kind of thing. I think a lot of people might want to do that, but not be able to walk the line. And I'm not reading the chat, but I did see one come through. Liz Bigo say, "I love those early videos." You might say they're traditional, but you have to also think about the times. I mean, I have to say, I have a vivid memory of of watching a video where you're like talking about phrasal verbs and getting some food out of the refrigerator and explaining something. I was like, I'd never seen anything like that before. I mean, I'd see obviously, kid shows where they were doing things like that, but this is for adults, and I'm teaching adults too, and like, wow, I could do something like that, like Jennifer.
Yeah.
So,
A lot of experiments over the years.
Very cool. Well, we need to wrap things up in just a couple of minutes. I just wanted to say, is there anything that, we've got a bunch of people here, and we're going to share the recording. Is there anything that you want to tell people about, either that you're doing or how you're feeling these days about English language teaching, something I didn't mention? Or in the meantime, I'm just going to put up the screenshot so people can see how to get in touch with you. And you can
Goodness,
talk.
Jace, we could talk for a whole another hour and a whole
Good. I
another
have
set of
all.
topics. I guess I didn't get too much into like how I got into teaching and the path that I took. But if
Yeah.
there's one brief takeaway I want to say to any new teachers out there, or teachers who are just not sure which path to take right now, is that a lot of what has happened to me was not planned. And there are times where I've stood in the middle of where I am in life thinking, what path am I on? Did I take a wrong turn? Where am I? And I think sometimes we just have to stop worrying about what path we could have, should have taken. Maybe the path that we're on is really where we're meant to be, because I thought I was going to be a Russian language teacher. That was how I started training out to be. Now I'm an English language teacher. I thought I would be a classroom teacher for most of my career. Now I've spent more time online. I thought I might have more textbooks, and actually I have now more digital content online. So all these things that I thought at one point didn't come about, but I can't look back with regrets, because
No.
this is how my career has been. This is how it was shaped. So just don't be afraid too much of all those twists and unexpected turns. Maybe they're all for the best.
That's great advice. It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming and being a featured teacher here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's always a great joy talking with
Yeah.
you, talking with other teachers. And I look forward to the follow-up.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the follow-up before we end things here. We will have a small group question and answer session that we're calling Ask the Experts, which will always follow a featured teacher, which will be in Zoom, like we are here, but with just 22 people. If you're interested, if you want to be one of those teachers in that session, Ask the Experts, please join the Featured Teacher Facebook group. And I will be sharing this recording through that group, and also American TESOL Institute, which makes this possible, Featured Teachers that Ask the Experts. You'll be seeing things there about that as well. So look out for the recording, everybody, and look out for Ask the Experts.
Thank you, Jace. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.